Welcome to this video on how to build a chatbot using Amazon Bedrock. Last year, I introduced ChatGPT to my 8-year-old daughter Anisha, and since then, she's been pestering me to create a chatbot. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a chatbot using Amazon Bedrock, Llama 2 Foundation model, Langchain, and Streamlit. This video is also part of my Udemy course on Amazon Bedrock and Generative AI, which you can check from the link below. Also, look out for some of the other use cases I have as part of this YouTube playlist. Now let's go ahead and check out what we're going to build as part of this use case. In this section, we're going to build a chatbot using Amazon Bedrock. So before we get into the architecture for chatbot, let's take a quick look what our end chatbot is going to look like. So this is what our chatbot is going to look like, and I'm running it locally on my machine. So we have, hi, this is chatbot Anisha, and then powered by Bedrock and Llama 2. So let me just pose a question. Hi, what is your name? And you can see on the top, it's showing as running. It's giving me a fairly long answer. Hi, my name is Llama, and then it's giving me some more details. Let me pose another question to it. Who's the best tennis player? And let's see what's the response. And on the top, you can see it showing as running. And you can see it's provided a fairly detailed answer, which says I cannot provide a definitive answer to who's the best tennis player, but it names some of the greatest ones, Roger Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. So the answer is fairly good. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the architecture for this chatbot that we're going to build using Amazon Bedrock. So for this chatbot, for the front end, we're going to build using Streamlit. So Streamlit is a Python library that's being used for creating the front end. For the backend, we're going to use Langchain and Amazon Bedrock, where we will use Llama 2 Foundation model. Now this is super important. If you don't have experience with Streamlit or Langchain, then please go to the last lecture of this section, where I'll give you a high-level overview of what is Streamlit and what is Langchain and why we need to use them when we're creating a chatbot with Amazon Bedrock. Now for this chatbot architecture, as we discussed, we're going to use Amazon Bedrock and Llama 2 Foundation model. Then we're going to use Langchain and Streamlit. Now it's pretty clear why we are going to use Streamlit. That's for developing the front end. Amazon Bedrock and Llama we are going to use as a foundation model. Now the question is, why do we need to use Langchain? Now let's take an example. Say we are chatting with the foundation model, and the first question we ask, as we did previously, who are the top 3 tennis players? And say it comes up with a response of these 3 names. And then the next question we pose is next 3. So what we are trying to highlight is who are the next 3 best players after these 3 names. So if you pose the second question next 3 to the foundation model, it will hallucinate and it will not be able to understand what is the context. And the reason for that is foundation models are stateless. They do not have any memory. So what that means is whatever you provide in the context window as a prompt, it will be able to answer. But once you provide the next prompt, it will not be able to connect the 2 prompts. So that's why we need to use Langchain in this scenario. So Langchain has different modules, and we're going to discuss 3 of them here. The first one is the Langchain memory. So we have a module called as conversation buffer memory. So what this does is, once we pose this question, top 3 tennis players, and it gives some answers, it is going to store this conversation in the Langchain memory. So then when the next question comes, next 3, it's going to read that, and then in combination with the first question, it's going to send the entire thing to the Langchain prompt. So for this prompt, we use a Langchain method called predict or run. It will combine this first question and answer. Then it will add the second question that has been asked, and together it will create a prompt based on the foundation model that you have selected. So you might know, and we'll discuss in the later sections, for each foundation model, there's a particular way of writing the prompt. to get the best outcome. So in this case, it will format the past question and response plus the new question, format it in the way Llama 2 would like, and then send this question to Amazon Bedrock foundation model, which is Llama 2 in this case. Then Llama 2 would process all these details and answer the question being posed. And then this answer is going to be sent to the front end, which will be displayed to the user. But then this response will also be written to this Langchain memory. So when the user asks the third question, it is going to combine the first question, the second question, and the third question that has been posed. So we discussed in this architecture about Amazon Foundation model. We discussed about Streamlit, and then we discussed about two modules in Langchain. One is the Langchain memory, and the second one is the Langchain prompt. Now there is a third element as well called as Lang chains, and in this case we're going to use conversation chain. So what chains in Langchain do is they are able to connect this foundation model to various other components, say external data sources, internal data sources, and in our case it's going to be able to connect with this memory, then it's going to able to connect with this prompt. So it can establish the connection between various external data sources and modules. So this is the architecture we're going to build. So the first we're going to build the backend, and then we're going to build the front end. Now let's go ahead and build this hands-on. Hope this lecture was useful. Thank you. Okay, now let's go ahead and build this chatbot. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build the backend using Langchain and Amazon Bedrock. So we're going to use Llama 2 foundation model to build this chatbot. And then we're going to build the front end using Streamlit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open this Anaconda Navigator. Now I have the Anaconda Navigator open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the Visual Studio Code Editor using this navigator. And this is really important because if you don't do that, then your Streamlit code might not work later. Okay, so here is the Visual Studio Code Editor. So I'll just do a launch. So now my Visual Studio Code Editor is open. So I'll just click on File and Open Folder. So I've just created this blank Bedrock Chatbot folder. Let me just open this. And you can see it's completely blank, so there's nothing out here. So now let me just go ahead and click on this file and new file, and it's a Python type. And let me just do a save as. So we'll say chatbot backend. Okay, and just do a save. Okay, now what I have done is to make it easier for you on how to write this code, I've just compiled a list of steps that we can use to write this code. So let me just copy this. So this should be available with the PDF that I'm going to share as part of this course. Okay, let me just paste it here. Okay, now let's look at the step 1. So here is a step 1. So we discussed in the architecture earlier, we're going to use the Llama 2 as the foundation model. Then the second thing we're going to do is we're going to use Langchain because the foundation models are stateless, so they don't have a memory. So for that, we're going to use this module from Langchain called as conversation buffer memory. Then the second thing we're going to use from Langchain is conversation chain. So what this conversation chain does is it connects the foundation model to modules in Langchain which can use prompt as well as this memory. So these are the three things we're going to use: Amazon Bedrock, Langchain memory, and Langchain conversation chain. So those are the modules we have to import. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to import OS. So that should be pretty straightforward. You can see here I just highlighted all the modules that we need to import. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to say from Langchain dot LLMs. So you can see the Langchain has a module called as LLMs, which allows it to connect to any foundation model. So that's what we're going to do. And then I'm going to say dot, and you will see that it shows all the foundation models that it can connect to. So you have the Cohere, you have the AI-21, and if you do OpenAI, you will see that it can also connect to OpenAI from Microsoft. But for us, we're going to stick to Bedrock. So we're going to say Bedrock, and then we're going to say import Bedrock. Okay. Next, we're going to import is conversation buffer memory. So from here. Okay. So I will say from Langchain dot memory, and you can see it shows me memory, and import. So I'll say conversation, and it will show me all the ones related to conversation buffer memory. So conversation buffer memory, conversation buffer, window memory, etc. And I'm going to just stick to conversation buffer memory. Okay, now what we have to do is we have to import this conversation chain, and let me just say from Langchain dot chains, and you can see it gives me this option, import, and you can see conversation chain is here. So that's what I'm going to import. So I think now we're good. So we imported the Bedrock service, we imported the conversation buffer memory, and we imported the conversation chain. Okay, now let's go ahead and write a function that will help us connect with the Bedrock service. Now let's go ahead and write this function, and let's give it a name. So maybe I'll say demo underscore chatbot. Okay, now we have to establish a connection with the Bedrock service. So for that, let me say demo LM is equal to, and the way you write in Langchain when you want to connect to a particular LLM or a foundation model service like Bedrock. So I'll say Bedrock, and you can see it's giving me Bedrock, and you can see all the arguments that you can pass. So here you have the credentials profile name, then you have the model ID, then you have the model keyword arguments. So those are the three we need to pass to be able to connect with the Bedrock service and Llama 2 foundation model. Okay, so the first thing I will say is profile. Okay, here it gives me the credentials profile name, and you can see here below the profile name that I'm going to use is going to be default, and you can use anything you want. And if you want to modify your credentials, you can do edit credentials, and you can see the credentials here. So these are my admin credentials. I'm going to delete it after this video, but if you want to modify or use something else, you can go ahead and do that. And we saw that it's a string, so I'll say default. Okay, so next we're going to use model ID, which tells Bedrock which particular foundation model to connect to, and it's a string. So now let's do a little bit Google and see what is the model ID for Llama 2. So I just do Google. So I will just say Amazon Bedrock Llama 2 foundation model ID, and I think I just go here, and then so here you can get the model ID for the one which you're trying to use. So we'll say maybe we'll just use this one. So let me just copy this, and let me just go back, and I can just paste it here. Next thing we have to do is we have to provide the model argument. So we'll say model arguments, and what it essentially means is we have to give all the inference parameters. So if I just go back to this documentation page, I can also click on this inference parameters and search for the foundation model that we are trying to use. So in this case, it's Llama 2 models, and you can see these are all the inference parameters that have been provided. So maybe I'll just copy this one that's here. So you can see it has four things: prompt, and prompt we don't require because we are going to use the Langchain prompt template. So we can skip this, but these three we can use. So in earlier section we discussed what is temperature for a foundation model. The temperature decides what is the randomness of the response that you're going to get from the foundation model. And similarly, top P is used in a similar fashion for defining the randomness and diversity of the response. Then you have the max generation length, and this determines what would be the length of our response. So here you can see it's 2048 tokens, and you can say approximately every 100 tokens is equal to 75 words. So if we put maximum, which is 2048 tokens, that is 75% of this, which is about approximately 1500 words. But we'll just go with the default values that are defined here. So let me just copy this, just put it here, and let me just move this to a little right. Okay, so prompt, we don't need prompt because we're going to use the Langchain prompt template. And the temperature, let's just see what is the default value. Temperature is 0.5, 0.9, and 512. So we'll say 0.9, and this was 0.5, 0.5, and I think this was 512. So the limit we are setting is for 512 tokens. Okay, let me move this a little up. Okay, I think that's pretty much it, and this should help us connect with the foundation model with these inference parameters. And then we can just do a return and demo underscore LLM. Okay, so that's the second task we have accomplished. Now, before we go ahead and create this conversation buffer memory and conversation chain, let's go and test this out and see if this is going to give us a response. Okay, so to test out this LLM, we'll use something known as predict method in the Langchain. So Langchain has two methods, which is predict and run. So what these methods allow us to do is, so you can just pass in the input in any format that you want, and then what Langchain would do is it will convert that input, user input, into a prompt that is appropriate for that particular foundation model. So now let's go ahead and do that. So what we'll do is we'll say return and demo score LLM, and then we'll use the predict method. So we'll say predict, and this will need some argument. So maybe we can say input underscore text. Okay, and for now I'm just going to comment it out because this return we're going to pass to this Langchain template. Okay, so I think it's giving me an error. I think we need the argument here as well. So I'll just say input text. Okay, now let's go and run this particular function. So I will say a response is equal to demo chatbot, and then we pass some input. Say hi, what is your name? So we'll do something simple. Okay, now let's just print it out and say response. Okay, great. So I think everything looks good. We don't seem to have any error. So I'll just do a save, and let me do terminal, new terminal. Okay, now I'm just going to run this. So it's taking time. That means probably it's making a connection. Okay, it's giving me an error saying that Bedrock object has no attribute predict. Okay, probably it should be in the lowercase. So let me just go ahead and change that. So I just made it into lowercase. And let me just do a save, and let's run it again. Okay, awesome. So it's giving me a response. You can see here. Hello, my name is Llama. I'm a large language model trained by a team of researchers in Meta. How can I help you today? So maybe we'll just give one more question and then we can proceed ahead. What is the temperature in London, like, and let me just do a clear here so we can see the response clearly. So I'll just save this and let's do a run. Okay, awesome. After waiting for a few minutes, I think it's giving me a response. It says temperature in London can vary throughout the year, and it's giving me some details on that, which seems pretty relevant. Okay, awesome. So I think this is good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment it out and I'm just going to leave it as it is so that if you follow along, then it can just help you. Okay, and I'm just going to uncomment this. Great. Okay, now let's go ahead and proceed to step 3, which is creating a function for conversation buffer memory. So if you go to the architecture, this is what we're going to look to create a buffer memory which can store the past history of the chat. Okay, so let me just go here. Okay, before I do this, I just want to show you one thing. We can just remove this input text from Chatbot because this is only for testing. Now we don't need to pass any arguments here. We'll pass the arguments only in the conversation chain. Okay, so I'm here. So let's call it demo underscore maybe memory. Now we'll just say a variable memory, or you can name it anything you want, and we'll say conversation buffer memory, and then we'll just pass arguments, and you can see it has multiple arguments, but it just basically needs two key things. So one, Langchain memory or conversation buffer memory needs a large language model or foundation model like Llama 2, which can summarize all the past messages and the new messages. So it needs to connect to the foundation model, and that is Llama 2 in our case. So we'll need to provide it details around which foundation model it needs to connect to. And the second thing it needs is the max token size. So if you remember, for foundation models, we have a context window which says what is the maximum amount of tokens, and if you convert the tokens into words, what's the maximum amount of words that you can provide in one single shot. The first thing we need to provide it is the details of LLM that we're going to use. For the LLM, we already have this particular function, demo chatbot. So that's what we're going to use. So I will say here, so let me just say LLM underscore data is equal to demo chatbot. Okay. So now we can substitute this value here. Let's say LLM underscore data. Okay. And the next one we need to provide is the max token limit, and we can just keep it what we have provided as max gen length here for Llama 2, 512, and this will vary based on the foundation model you use. We saw that the max token limit for Llama 2 is 2048. If you just remember here, it's 2048. But remember, the more token limit you provide, the higher is going to be your cost, because the cost would depend on per 1000 tokens. Okay, so then we can just do, so we can say return memory from here. Okay, now I think we have written the function for conversation buffer memory. Now the next thing we need to do is write a function for conversation chain. And we discussed earlier, the conversation chain as per the architecture helps us connect with this prompt through predict method, and also helps connect the foundation model, in this case Llama 2, with the Langchain memory. Okay, so we'll say, and let's call it as demo underscore chain. Okay. Now this particular function requires three things. One is the details of the memory, the details of the foundation model, and then we also need it to print out its internal messages. So now let's go ahead and do that. So let me say Okay, so we need to give it a name. Let's call it LLM underscore conversation. That will be equal to, now we have to look at the module that we had imported, which is conversation chain. So we'll say conversation chain, and it's here. Now we need to pass the argument. So you can see it has many different arguments. So we're going to focus on just three. And the first one is the LLM that we're going to use. And let's add that here. Let's name it as maybe LLM chain data maybe. And then basically what it provides is this particular function, which will give us the details of the foundation model. So maybe demo underscore chatbot, demo chatbot. Okay. So now we can provide the LLM, which is this Llama model that we have here. So we'll say LLM underscore chain data. Next thing we need to provide it is the details of this conversation buffer memory. So what we're going to say is memory, and here we're going to use memory from here. So let's say memory. Okay, and now the third thing we have to pass is something known as verbose, and it's a, and you can see here it's a boolean, so I'll just say true. So basically what it does is it prints out some internal state of the Langchain chains. Okay, now it's showing me an error here, and I think that's because we need to pass some arguments here. So the first argument we need to pass is the input text that is going to come from user, and the second one is it requires a memory. So hopefully this should go away. Okay, good. This is gone now. Okay, now this seems good, but maybe I'll just change this name here from demo chain to something more meaningful. So let me just say conversation. Okay, now let's write the last piece of the puzzle. So in this, we're going to take the user input and then pass it to the Langchain prompt template using the predict method as we had done earlier. So let's call it as chat reply, and that will be equal to this LLM conversation. So LLM underscore conversation dot predict, and then we just pass some argument, and this is input equal to input underscore text, and that's the argument we had here. And then we'll just say return chat underscore reply. Okay, it's giving me an error. I think I just forgot the R here. Okay, I think this looks pretty good. So let me just do a save. So we are done with creating the front end. And if you just briefly look at the steps, so we did a whole bunch of imports. Then we created a function which allows us to create to Amazon Bedrock service and Llama 2 foundation model. Then in step 3, we created memory for the application using Langchain memory module. And then we created the conversation chain again using Langchain, which allows us to connect to this memory and input text from the user. And then finally, we will pass this input text to the Langchain prompt template. Now that we have built the backend, now we need to build the front end. If we are building a chatbot for an organization, then probably we would have a front end team which is going to build a front end for this application. Streamlit is a very simple Python library which allows you to build front end, and it provides most of the code out of box. So let's just take a look. So if I just go to Streamlit documentation, it says Streamlit is an open source Python library that makes it easy to create and share beautiful custom web apps for machine learning and data science. In just few minutes, you can build and deploy powerful data apps. So this is what we're going to use to build our front end. So you can see here, it provides you a lot of code out of box to build basic LLM chat apps from OpenAI as well as Amazon Bedrock. So what I've done is I have taken this course So this is the source code provided by Streamlit and AWS, and I have modified it based on my requirements. So I'll just quickly walk you through what are the changes that you can make to customize the front end as well as add the functions that you have written here. So let's take a look. So I just want to highlight where I have put these 2 stars. You can see all the places 2 stars. You have to modify those lines. You can modify. It's either to update the functions that you have written here, or you can modify the look and feel of your chatbot. So the first thing you do is you import Streamlit and the chatbot file that you have in the backend. So here you can see import Streamlit as st, and if I just show you here, so the first thing you can see here, you import Streamlit as st, and that's what we have done. The next thing is you have to import this backend file here. So import xy, which is basically the name of your backend file. So I'll say chatbot, and you can see here backend, and import this file as, and you need to give it some name. Maybe I'll just say demo, and that's what I've highlighted here. And you can see the 2 stars, which shows that you have to modify this file. The second one is you can modify the title, and you can just go to the link to see how to modify this title. So if I just go here, and this is how you modify the title. So it's st.title, and then you just provide the title you want, and that's what I've done. st.title, and this is hi, this is chatbot Anisha and sunglasses, and this is what I've written here, and this is how it will show. So the third thing is we need to provide Langchain memory to the session cache, and you can just go to this link and it will tell you a little bit about session state and how we deal with session state in the Streamlit. But you don't need to modify anything, you just let it be as it is. And the only thing you need to modify, and you can see here again, you need to provide the details of your memory function. So if in our case, if you see, we imported the chatbot backend file as demo. So you say demo and then dot whatever is the name of your memory function. So if I go here, and the name of my memory function is demo underscore memory. So that's the value you substitute here. Okay. And then similarly, you add the UI chat history to the session cache, and you don't need to make any change here. You let it be as it is. And then in the fifth one, you render the chat history. Again, you don't need to make any changes to this. The next is you need to provide the input text box. So if I go here, so you can see chat with Udemy course bot here. So that's the input text window that you can provide, and you can just modify here whatever you want. So I've written chat with Rahul's Bedrock Udemy course, and you can change it here, and that's what I highlighted with 2 stars. And then you need to let everything be as it is. And then finally you have the chat response. Here what you need to modify it with is, if I just go here, and then you can replace this with the function you have for conversation chain. So you can replace it with demo conversation. So if I go here again, you can see 2 stars, and here you add demo. So like you have imported this file as demo, and then you provide the name of the conversation chain, and as we saw, it was demo underscore conversation in our case. And that's pretty much it. And then you don't need to make any change to this code. So as I said, this code is provided by AWS and Streamlit, and I have modified it as per the functions I have taken in the backend, as well as to modify some UI components. So if you want to add more data elements or modify anything else, then you can use all these widgets that have been provided in this Streamlit library. Okay, now I think everything looks good. So now we can go ahead and run this chatbot and see if it works. So I'll just go here and open new terminal. So now to make this chatbot run locally, this is the command that we're going to use. So it is Streamlit run the name of the frontend file .py. Okay, so now let me do that. So Streamlit, and the name of the frontend file is chatbot underscore frontend .py. And you can see it's giving me a URL, and it's automatically opening this URL in my browser. So you can see here now it's showing as running, stop and deploy. So it takes a little bit of time to come up. Okay, awesome. Now I just waited a few minutes and now you can see this chatbot has come up, and these are the details we had provided for user interface. So if I just go here and you can see this is what we had as title, and then if I just go down and the input text box said chat with Rahul's Bedrock Udemy course bot here, and that's what is come up. So now let's see if this works. So I'll say hi, what is your name, and let's see what is the response we get. So you can see on the top it's showing as running, stop and deploy. Okay, finally it's giving me a response. It says, hi, my name is Llama. I'm a large language model trained by a team of researchers at Meta. And then it's giving me a really long answer. Maybe I'll ask it one more question. Maybe I'll ask it a couple more questions. Where is New York? And it's giving me some answer. New York is state located in the northeastern United States, and it gives some more details. Okay, let me ask it a controversial question. Who is the best tennis player in the world? And let's see the answer. So it's giving me a good answer. It says it's difficult to say who's the best tennis player in the world. And then some of the top players currently include Novak Djokovic, Nadal, and Roger Federer. So I think that's a fairly good answer. So this is how you can build a chatbot. Now, as a next step, what you can do is you can also deploy this code on an EC2 instance, and so that you don't have to run it locally. Hope this use case was useful. Thank you.